Mighty men, hold the line! Trust in the shield wall! Show them Rome's might!
Have you ever considered that a single mistake by a great power could lead to the complete destruction of its most elite army in just a few hours? Before us lies a vast field strewn with tens of thousands of soldiers, where a colossal numerical superiority suddenly turns into a deadly trap.
Terrain favors a defensive line along this ridge, Tribune.
There are few events in the history of warfare that can compare in drama and tactical perfection to what happened on that hot August day in southern Italy. It was a moment when the military genius of one man challenged the power of an entire republic and nearly wiped it off the face of the earth.
Close formation. Front rank, lock your shields tight.
Watch the video to the end to find out how one tactical encirclement destroyed Rome's best army and why, despite this catastrophe, Rome still survived and prevailed. To begin with, I will reveal a secret that completely changes the perception of the beginning of this great campaign. Hannibal Barca accomplished the impossible by crossing the Alps with a huge army and war elephants. With this daring maneuver, he plunged the Roman Republic into a state of primal terror. His main goal was to completely destroy the system of alliances on which Roman power was based. By 216 BC, he had already inflicted two heavy defeats on the Romans. The battles of Trebia and Lake Trasimene came as a real shock to the Senate. These victories earned him a reputation as an invincible commander and a demigod of war. The Romans understood that an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered before had come to their land. Hannibal methodically ravaged the Italian countryside, provoking Rome into a decisive battle. He destroyed the estates of the nobility, but demonstratively left the lands of Rome's allies untouched in order to sow discord. This psychological game bore fruit, causing fury within the walls of Rome. The city demanded immediate retribution for the burned crops and humiliation. The Senate decided to assemble the largest army in its long history. They planned to crush the Carthaginian invader with a simply colossal number of legionaries. 8 full-strength legions, reinforced by numerous allied contingents, set out on this campaign. The total strength of the Roman army was close to 90,000 experienced warriors. The Romans sincerely believed that such an iron avalanche would easily crush the Carthaginians. The enemy army was almost half the size of the Roman army. However, the Roman consuls did not take into account the genius of their main opponent. Hannibal was waiting for just that, carefully preparing his most sophisticated trap. Every step the Carthaginian army took on Italian soil was a slap in the face to Roman dignity. In Rome itself, there was unprecedented tension, turning into a firm determination to finish off the enemy. All resources were mobilized, including funds from the city's richest treasuries. The whole world held its breath in anticipation of the clash between the two greatest powers of the era. Leadership of the Roman army was divided between two consuls with different personalities. Gaius Terentius Varro was eager for an immediate attack and easy glory. Lucius Aemilius Paulus, on the other hand, called for extreme caution and a wait-and-see approach. This internal disagreement became a hidden crack in the foundation of the future defense. Hannibal skillfully played on these contradictions, exploiting every miscalculation of his opponents. He understood that the Roman military machine was very cumbersome and predictable. While the Romans argued about tactics, the Carthaginians were already occupying the most advantageous positions. The plan to encircle the enemy had been maturing in Hannibal's mind long before the first trumpet call. Do you think Rome's tactic of assembling a giant army was justified in those circumstances? Or was it precisely this excessive mass of people that caused their tragic defeat? Share your opinion in the comments below this video. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new historical investigations about great commanders. Want to know the truth about why the small village of Cany became the site of the greatest massacre? Hannibal chose this location on the Aufidus River in Apulia with mathematical precision. This choice was not accidental and was based on a deep understanding of strategy and logistics. The commander saw the future battlefield as an instrument of victory in advance. He demonstrated his skill as a great strategist even before the start of the largest clash. Even before the armies met, he began to disrupt the enemy's plans. His every move was aimed at depriving Rome of its freedom of choice. First, he captured an important food warehouse located in the region. This was a powerful blow to the Roman army's supplies. The Romans could not ignore such a loss and were forced to respond. By forcing the Romans to follow him, Hannibal imposed the direction he wanted on them. He literally led the enemy to where he wanted them to be. And the Roman consuls, confident in their strength, fell for this bait. The terrain was a vast plain, ideal for cavalry operations. There were no hills or cover. The space opened up in all directions, allowing for quick maneuvers. It was in cavalry that the Carthaginians had a decisive qualitative advantage over the legionaries. Their horsemen were faster, more experienced, and more flexible. This advantage became deadly on such a plain. The Roman consuls led their troops to this place with absolute confidence. They believed that numbers would decide the outcome of the battle. The experience of past victories had blinded them. They set up a huge camp in close proximity to the Carthaginian army's positions. This meant that retreat was no longer an option. The army was preparing only for an offensive. The heat and dust of the region soon became important factors in the battle. The summer sun beat down mercilessly from early morning. The soldiers suffered from thirst and fatigue. Hannibal had calculated in advance how to turn the natural conditions to his advantage. He positioned his troops so that the sun and wind would work against the Romans. Even the weather became part of his plan. The psychological pressure on the Roman soldiers grew with every hour of agonizing waiting. They stood motionless, losing strength and patience. The tension grew even before the first blow. They were under the scorching sun, covered in dust and sweat. This undermined their morale. Fatigue imperceptibly turned into irritation. Varro, replacing Pallas as commander on the day of the battle, was eager to fight. He wanted to gain glory and prove his determination. Caution seemed like weakness to him. He saw only numerical superiority before him and dreamed of a quick victory. In his eyes, the enemy was already almost defeated. He did not entertain the idea of a complex trap. Hannibal provoked his hot-headedness with constant raids by light Numidian cavalry. These attacks were quick and daring. They got on the Romans' nerves. These minor skirmishes finally convinced the Romans of the need for a general battle. It seemed to them that the enemy was afraid of open combat. This was exactly what the Carthaginian commander wanted. The wind blowing from the sea lifted clouds of dry dust right into the faces of the legions. Visibility deteriorated and breathing became difficult. The soldiers squinted and lost their bearings. This detail was taken into account by the Carthaginian headquarters when planning their positions. Their troops stood so that the dust would blow toward the enemy. Even the direction of the wind became a weapon. The Romans, on the other hand, relied solely on their powerful and indestructible infantry. They believed in the strength of formation and discipline. Everything else seemed secondary to them. They formed their legions into unusually deep and dense columns to break through the center. It was a decision dictated by confidence. The mass was supposed to crush everything in its path. The Roman battering ram tactic had almost always brought them success in past wars. It had broken enemy armies more than once. Therefore, it was considered foolproof. They did not care about the flanks, believing that a frontal attack would solve all problems. This was their fatal mistake. They underestimated the flexibility of their enemy. However, they were facing an army trained to act as a single flexible organism. The Carthaginians knew how to retreat and advance on command. Everyone knew their task. Hannibal personally checked the readiness of each unit before giving the decisive signal to attack. He knew his soldiers and trusted them. This trust strengthened their fighting spirit. Hannibal lined them up so that each soldier knew his place in the coming chaos. He thought out in advance where the pressure would begin and where the retreat would follow. Nothing was left to chance. He turned the plain into a chessboard where Rome's pieces were doomed. Every move was calculated. The outcome of the game was decided before the first blow was struck. In the next chapter, you will learn how Hannibal forced the Romans into a deadly trap. This tactic is still considered the pinnacle of military art in all academies around the world. Want to know which order changed the course of world history? Are you ready for the shocking truth about how easy it is to deceive an entire army? You've definitely never heard of this unique secret before. Hannibal used a tactic that went against all the military logic of that ancient era. He lined up his infantry, not in a straight line, but in the shape of a huge crescent. This crescent was curved toward the Romans, luring them into attacking. At the center of this formation stood the Gallic and Spanish troops. They were given strict orders to slowly retreat under the powerful onslaught of the Roman battering ram. On the flanks, Hannibal positioned his most elite African legions. These veterans remained in place, waiting for their moment in complete silence. The Roman infantry saw that the center of the Carthaginian army was beginning to bend and retreat. With victorious cries, the legionaries rushed forward, believing in a quick victory. The deeper they wedged into the enemy's formation, the denser their own ranks became. The soldiers prevented each other from even swinging their swords for an effective strike. Hannibal himself was in the most dangerous place, right in the middle of the retreating Gauls. He inspired them with his presence and kept order in the ranks. It was a completely controlled retreat, turning the front into a deep pocket. Roman power was gradually swallowed up by this flexible and lively trap. The legionaries did not notice how their flanks were completely open to attack. While the Roman center pressed forward, the African veterans made a sharp turn inward. They delivered crushing blows from the sides to the disoriented and huddled soldiers. The density of the Roman formation suddenly became their worst curse. Hannibal's crescent curved in the opposite direction, enveloping the Romans on three sides. At that moment, Hasdrubal's heavy cavalry had already crushed the Roman cavalry on the flanks. The Carthaginian horsemen swiftly bypassed the Roman army and struck it directly in the rear. The ring of death finally closed around 90,000 men. This was the first documented encirclement of such a huge superior force in history. It became the absolute benchmark for all future generations of great commanders. The Roman army found itself trapped on a tiny patch of sun-scorched earth. They became a huge and helpless target for the enemy. Inside the encirclement, unimaginable chaos and panic broke out among the legionnaires. The rear ranks continued to push forward, unaware that death awaited them ahead. The officers lost control of their troops, and their orders were drowned out by the roar of weapons. Hannibal watched from above, realizing that his plan had worked perfectly. Be sure to like this video if you are genuinely impressed by the strategic depth of the ancient masters of war. We strive to find the most interesting details of the great battles of the past for you. Your support helps the channel grow and make even higher quality videos. Every action you take is important to us. What you are about to learn will change your perception of the methodical destruction of armies. When the ring was completely closed, the battle turned into a systematic and bloody extermination of people. The space inside the encirclement quickly turned into a deadly trap from which there was no escape. Hannibal had his troops lined up in a crescent shape, which curved inward under pressure from the Romans. The Romans thought they were breaking through the defenses, but in fact they were voluntarily walking into a trap. When the Carthaginian flanks closed behind the legionaries, the trap snapped shut for good. Thousands of soldiers found themselves trapped on a small patch of land under the scorching Italian sun. The huge size of the Roman army, which was supposed to bring them victory, now became their main curse. The Roman soldiers were so tightly packed that they could not even raise their shields. Their formation, which until recently had been considered a symbol of order, became the cause of their demise. Many died of suffocation and crushing before the Spanish sword even reached them. The dust kicked up by thousands of feet hung in the air like a thick curtain. It blinded the legionnaires and clogged their lungs. It became increasingly difficult to breathe, and panic spread faster than the commander's orders. The soldiers in the middle of the formation could not even see the enemy, but they could feel their own comrades pressing in on them from all sides. They had no room to swing their swords or even change position. With each step the Carthaginians took, the space narrowed, turning living people into a solid mass. The cries of the wounded drowned out the officers' words, and no one could understand what was happening at the edges of the battle. It was not a battle, but a slow and painful squeezing of a huge organism. Hannibal ordered his soldiers to act calmly and conserve their strength. The Carthaginians did not rush or rush forward unnecessarily. They methodically tightened the ring, delivering precise and measured blows. Each blow struck the vulnerable points of the Roman formation. The tired and immobilized soldiers were unable to defend themselves. Roman discipline in this confined space only exacerbated the general panic and hindered rescue efforts. Hannibal's Iberian and Gallic warriors worked like a well-oiled machine, replacing each other on the front line. They saw before them a helpless crowd that was unable to offer any organized resistance. The Carthaginians' weapons were short and sharp, ideal for slaughter in confined spaces. The commander watched the extermination closely from the nearest hill, remaining completely calm. He knew that time was on his side and did not allow his soldiers to lose their heads in rage. Consul Aemilius Paulus continued to fight to the last, despite being seriously wounded. He refused to leave the battlefield, even when his strength was failing. For him, fleeing meant a disgrace worse than death. He remained with his soldiers and died with them. His death became a symbol of the tragedy of the entire Roman army. The second consul, Varro, managed to escape with the remnants of the cavalry. Aemilius Paulus fell from his horse, and his loyal soldiers offered him their mounts so that he could escape. But the proud Roman preferred to share the fate of his legions to the very end. He did not want to return to Rome and explain to the Senate the reasons for such unprecedented disgrace. His death on the battlefield became an example of courage for future generations of Roman warriors. At the same time, Varro, whose arrogance had led to disaster, rode away, saving his own life. This flight forever tarnished his name in Roman history. On that day, almost the entire cream of the Roman aristocracy perished on the field of Cannae. Many noble families lost their heirs in a single day. The slaughter continued until sunset, as long as the victors had the strength. The Carthaginians acted without mercy, but without chaos. The killings were slow and inevitable. Dozens of senators and hundreds of horsemen who made up the political elite of the Republic lay on the battlefield. Rome had never before lost so many leaders in a single battle. The ground was soaked with blood to such an extent that it turned into a slippery mess that was difficult to walk on. As the sun began to set, silence descended on the valley, interrupted only by the moans of the dying. Hannibal ordered his men to stop the slaughter only when it became too dark to continue. Historians claim that Rome lost about 50,000 men killed that day. Several thousand more were taken prisoner. For them, any hope of salvation was gone forever. Carthage's losses were incomparably small compared to Rome's catastrophe. This made the defeat even more humiliating. The victory seemed absolute and final. For the ancient world, such losses were simply incredible and beyond comprehension. Entire cities in Italy lost their male population in just a few hours. Hannibal lost only about 6,000 men, most of whom were Gauls from the center line. This ratio of losses proved the superiority of tactical thinking over brute force. Carthage celebrated a triumph that seemed to be the end of Roman history. One of his commanders, Mago, told Hannibal outright that he knew how to win, but did not know how to use victory. If the Carthaginian army had moved on the city immediately, history could have taken a completely different course. Hannibal decided to give his soldiers a rest, hoping that Rome would ask for peace. This pause gave the Romans time to recover and organize their resistance. The great commander's mistake was a gift to his sworn enemies. In the next chapter, you will learn why this triumph did not spell the end of Rome. Hannibal won the battle, but his strategy was thwarted by something more powerful. What was the real reason Carthage never achieved a final victory? Do you think Hannibal should have taken the risk and attacked Rome immediately? Magarbal, the cavalry commander, urged his leader to march immediately on the enemy's capital. He promised that in 5 days they would be dining on the capital. Hannibal exercised caution, which still provokes heated debate among historians. He understood that Rome was a powerful fortress with enormous walls. The experienced cavalry commander saw before him a defeated and demoralized enemy. He believed that it was necessary to strike while the iron was hot and not give the Romans time to recover. According to Magarbal, the panic in Rome itself was so great that the city could surrender without a fight. But Hannibal remained steadfast in his decision to stay put. He did not want to risk everything for the illusory hope of a quick surrender of the fortified metropolis. An unprepared assault on such a city could have been disastrous for his weary army. Hannibal's army needed to treat the wounded and replenish its food supplies. The commander hoped that after such a defeat, Rome itself would humbly ask for peace. He waited for envoys with offers of surrender on Carthage's terms. His soldiers had gone through an incredibly difficult battle and were physically exhausted. Many needed medical attention, and the horses needed rest and fresh feed. Hannibal believed that a march on Rome would require complex siege equipment, which he did not have at that moment. He decided that political pressure after such a massacre would work better than a bloody assault on the walls. The commander believed that the logic of war would force the Senate to admit complete defeat. His strategy was based on the gradual political dismantling of the entire Roman Confederation in Italy. Hannibal believed that the destruction of the army was the final point in the war between states. But for the Romans, this tragedy was only the beginning of a new stage in the struggle. The Roman psyche proved to be much stronger than any foreign invader could have imagined. The Carthaginian expected Rome's Italian allies to immediately switch sides. He wanted to isolate the city, depriving it of the support of its neighbors and resources. Hannibal saw himself as the liberator of Italy from Roman rule. However, he did not take into account how deeply Roman influence had penetrated the culture of neighboring peoples. Most Italian communities preferred to remain faithful to their old treaties with the Republic. In Rome itself, the Senate officially forbade citizens from mourning their dead relatives. Emergency measures were introduced to stabilize internal order within the city walls. The Romans categorically refused to discuss the possibility of peace with the Carthaginian ambassador Barca. They demonstrated their unyielding and iron will to the entire ancient world. Women were forbidden to cry in the streets so as not to undermine the morale of the other inhabitants. Senators personally patrolled the gates and ensured that no riots broke out in the city. The Roman government set an example of absolute calm in the face of complete disaster. They even refused to ransom their prisoners so as not to give Hannibal extra money. It was a harsh message to the enemy that the fight would continue to the very end. Hannibal found himself in a situation where a great victory did not bear political fruit. He continued to maneuver across Italy, capturing one city after another, including Capua. But the strategic initiative began to slowly but surely slip from his grasp. Cany was the pinnacle of his genius, but also the limit of his capabilities. Capua's defection to Carthage was a great success, but it also became a burden. Now Hannibal had to defend his new allies from Roman punitive detachments. Instead of advancing, his army began to scatter among various fortresses. Each new victory cost him loyal veterans whom he had no one to replace. The enemy, on the contrary, became more vicious and organized with each passing month. The Romans began to realize that open battles with Hannibal would lead to their destruction. They began to change their approach to this protracted and bloody war. Italy's resources were gradually being depleted, and Hannibal never received any significant help. He was left alone to face the resurgent power of the Roman Republic. The Republic switched to a tactic of wearing down the enemy, as suggested by Fabius Maximus. Roman troops followed Hannibal closely, but never engaged in large-scale combat. They destroyed small groups of foragers and burned crops to deprive the enemy of food. The Carthaginian genius found himself trapped in endless skirmishes. His army was decimated by disease and constant stress, unable to deliver a decisive blow. Each captured city required a garrison, which scattered the Carthaginian commander's forces. Rome, meanwhile, continued to form new legions from its remaining reserves and young men. Hannibal won skirmishes, but he could not control the entire territory of Italy at once. The war turned into an exhausting confrontation that wore down both sides. Hannibal wrote letters to Carthage asking for reinforcements, but politicians at home were in no hurry to help him. They feared the strengthening of his personal power and preferred to spend money on other fronts. At the same time, Rome mobilized everyone who could bear arms, including slaves and the elderly. The state functioned as a single military factory, producing thousands of new swords and shields. The scale of Roman mobilization was simply unparalleled in the history of that time. As a result, Hannibal spent many more years in Italy without ever taking Rome. His triumph at Cannae remained a brilliant but useless feat in the grand scheme of history. The Roman state survived thanks to its structure and the loyalty of its citizens. The path to ultimate victory lay through years of deprivation and suffering for the people. Despite all his talents, one man could not defeat an entire system. Hannibal remained a great tactician, but Rome proved to be a great strategic player. Years later, he was forced to leave Italy without achieving his main goal. The resilience of the Roman people turned their most shameful defeat into the foundation for a future empire. Do you think world history would have changed if Hannibal had decided to storm Rome that week? What if I told you that Rome was saved by a man who was called Slow? After Cannae, Rome officially returned to the tactics of Quintus Fabius Maximus, known by the nickname the Slow. Until recently, he had been ridiculed, his caution considered a weakness. Now, his approach was the only chance for the state to survive. He advocated a war of attrition, deliberately rejecting heroic and quick victories. The Romans finally recognized that the old methods no longer worked. Fabius categorically avoided major battles with Hannibal. He understood that in open field, the Carthaginian genius was practically invincible. Every attempt to engage in a decisive battle could end in another catastrophe. This realization was painful but necessary. Rome abandoned its pride for the sake of survival. Victory was now understood not as a single battle, but as a long journey. The tactic was to apply constant pressure without a decisive blow. The Romans destroyed small detachments of foragers and scouts. They deprived the enemy of food and rest. The legions followed Hannibal's army closely, without engaging in direct combat. They occupied only fortified heights and convenient hills. This prevented the Carthaginians from imposing battle. This strategy gradually wore down the enemy. The Carthaginians were unable to use their cavalry and tactical flexibility. Every day without a major battle weakened their army. Time began to work exclusively against Carthage. Provisions were running low, and allies were having doubts. The pressure was slow but inevitable. The Roman state showed a flexibility that was rare for it. Even slaves were mobilized to form new legions. The city understood that the war would be long and difficult. The economy was completely restructured for military needs. Luxury was abandoned, and all resources went to the army. Rome learned to live in a state of constant tension. The Republic's fleet blocked sea supply routes. This seriously hampered Hannibal's communication with his hometown. Reinforcements and money were becoming increasingly scarce. At the same time, the Carthaginian Senate was in no hurry to help its best general. Internal intrigues and fear of his fame prevented unity. Politics weakened military success. Hannibal found himself effectively trapped in Italy. He was winning battles but losing the war of resources. Each of his movements required more and more effort. The Romans, meanwhile, fielded army after army. Their human resources seemed inexhaustible. Their losses were replenished faster than those of their enemy. The Fabian tactic gave Rome the most valuable thing: time. Over the years, a new generation of commanders had grown up. They no longer repeated the old mistakes. Future commanders carefully studied Hannibal's actions. They analyzed his every maneuver and every deception. The bitter experience of Cany became a school of survival for them. In the next chapter, you will learn how Rome brought the war to enemy territory. This decision forced Hannibal to leave Italy forever and return to defend Carthage. In the next chapter, you will learn how they coped with this psychological pressure. How did Rome find the strength to deliver a decisive blow to the very heart of the enemy empire? In Rome, the star of the young and ambitious Publius Cornelius Scipio rose during this period. He was one of the few officers who survived the terrible massacre at Cany. This defeat became the most important and valuable lesson of his life. Scipio realized that Hannibal had to be defeated using his own methods and tactics. The young Scipio saw with his own eyes how the Roman army was dying because of its own sluggishness. He analyzed every move of the Carthaginian troops and learned their tricks. The future commander realized that the old methods of warfare were no longer successful. To save the state, it was necessary to completely change the approach to training soldiers. Scipio began to prepare himself for the role of the man who could stop the great Hannibal. He proposed a bold plan to attack Carthage's base in Spain and then in Africa. This strategic maneuver completely turned the tide of the long and exhausting war. Scipio proved himself a brilliant tactician by capturing the key city of New Carthage. His successes restored the Roman people's faith in the possibility of ultimate victory over the enemy. The capture of New Carthage was carried out with incredible speed and precision. Scipio used his knowledge of the terrain and struck where he was least expected. This victory gave Rome control over vast territories and boosted the morale of the legionaries. Now the Romans saw that their leader could defeat their famous enemy. Spain gradually began to slip out of Carthaginian influence. Scipio methodically deprived Hannibal of his sources of mercenaries and the rich silver mines of Spain. When the Roman legions landed in Africa, the Carthaginian government fell into a state of panic. They ordered Hannibal to leave Italy immediately to defend his native capital. The greatest victor of Cannae was forced to leave the lands he had ravaged for 15 years. Hannibal left Italy with a heavy heart. realizing the scale of the impending threat. He had been victorious on the battlefield for so many years, but now he was forced to retreat. His veterans were exhausted from long campaigns, and resources at home were dwindling before his eyes. The Carthaginian authorities hoped that only his presence could save the city from destruction. The great commander returned home to fight his last battle. The struggle in Africa became the final act in this grand historical drama between two nations. Scipio used his time in Spain to train his soldiers in new methods of warfare. He created an army that was as flexible as Hannibal's own troops. A decisive clash between these two military geniuses was becoming absolutely inevitable for both sides. Scipio taught his legionaries to operate in smaller, more mobile groups. He introduced a new system of signals and troop control right in the heat of battle. Soldiers learned to trust their commanders and act according to the situation, rather than simply standing in a wall. The Roman war machine became much more dangerous and sophisticated than ever before. The future victory of the entire republic was being forged on African soil. Scipio understood that simply defeating Hannibal was not enough to ensure Rome's security. It was necessary to completely crush the military and economic power of Carthage as a state. Each of his victories in Africa brought Rome closer to world domination in the Mediterranean. History was preparing for the final battle that would determine the future of all Western civilization. The Romans no longer wanted to simply defend themselves. They wanted to eliminate the threat from the south once and for all. Destroying Carthage's fleet and trade links became the most important goal of this campaign. Scipio saw before him not only the battlefield, but also the future map of the world. Every decision he made was important for many generations of people. The whole world held its breath in anticipation of the outcome of this clash between the two greatest minds of antiquity. Do you think Rome could have survived if it had not had a leader like Scipio? The decisive battle at Zama took place in 202 BC in Africa. Scipio prepared his army, taking into account all the strengths and weaknesses of Hannibal's tactics. He found an effective way to completely neutralize Carthage's powerful war elephants on the battlefield. Scipio created passages in the legion's formation through which the animals could run without causing harm. The Roman commander understood that elephants were Hannibal's main striking force and could wreak havoc among the infantry. Instead of a solid line, he positioned his troops so that wide corridors were formed between them. When the enraged beasts rushed to attack, the legionaries simply stepped aside and let them pass. In these passages, the soldiers threw javelins at the animals and frightened them with loud trumpet blasts. As a result, the elephants turned in panic and began to trample their own Carthaginian troops. In this battle, the Roman cavalry played a decisive role, striking the enemy from behind. For the first time in his life, Hannibal suffered a complete and crushing defeat on the battlefield. Zama was a mirror image of Cany, but with the victory of Roman arms. After this battle, Carthage forever lost its status as a great and independent power. The Romans were able to negotiate with the Numidian king, who provided them with excellent cavalry for a decisive maneuver. While Hannibal's infantry fought fiercely in the center, Scipio's horsemen bypassed the enemy and struck from behind. This caused complete disorganization in the Carthaginian ranks and led to a mass retreat. Hannibal, who had previously surrounded the Romans himself, this time found himself in a tactical trap. His army was almost completely destroyed on the plain under the scorching sun. Scipio received the honorary nickname Africanus and became a national hero in the eyes of the Romans. Hannibal spent the rest of his life in exile, constantly hiding from his persistent Roman pursuers. He committed suicide to avoid being captured by his sworn enemies. Thus ended the era of Titans that began with a bloody dawn in the fields of southern Apulia. After the war, Hannibal tried to reform Carthage, but the Romans could not leave their main enemy alone. He had to flee his hometown and wander through the courts of eastern kings in search of refuge. Roman envoys pursued him everywhere, demanding the extradition of the most dangerous man of antiquity. Surrounded by enemies in distant Bithynia, the great commander took poison from his ring. He preferred death to shameful chains and a triumphal procession through the streets of Rome. Hannibal's defeat meant the end of Carthaginian influence on the course of world history forever. Rome became the sole master of the region, with no worthy rivals of its level. The lessons of Cany were learned at the cost of the blood of thousands of legionaries who fell on the fields of Italy. The memory of Hannibal continued to terrify Roman children for many centuries after his death. From that moment on, Rome transformed from a regional power into a true world empire. Carthage's wealth and control of the Mediterranean Sea gave the Republic incredible opportunities for growth. All of Rome's future enemies now looked with apprehension at the fate of a city that had been unable to withstand the onslaught of the legions. History had shown that even the most brilliant leader cannot forever resist an organized system. Fear of the possible return of a new Hannibal forced the Romans to constantly improve their army. Historians conclude that Rome survived thanks to its unique socio-political system of values. The Roman army consisted of loyal citizens defending their land, not mercenaries. The system of alliances created a huge reserve of people who did not abandon the Republic after defeat. The Senate showed exceptional composure, refusing to acknowledge the reality of the disaster and continuing its work. While Carthage's mercenary troops fought for loot and pay, Roman legionaries defended their homes and families. This gave Rome's soldiers incredible motivation even in the darkest days of the war. Every citizen felt personally responsible for the fate of their homeland and was ready to sacrifice themselves. The collective will of the people proved to be much stronger than the professionalism of any trained army of the time. They did not execute the surviving commanders, but rallied together for further long and stubborn resistance. This unity of the elite and the people became a force that genius could not overcome. The cultural mindset of victory at any cost permeated all strata of Roman society at that time. Rome proved that a state based on civic duty has incredible and remarkable vitality. The Roman senators showed wisdom and did not seek to blame their military leaders after the defeat at Cannae. Instead, they focused on rebuilding their forces and strengthening the city's defenses. Wealthy citizens voluntarily donated their money and jewelry to the state treasury to equip new legions. The poor did not stand aside either and joined the army en masse to defend their walls. Cannae became a harsh lesson for Rome, forcing the Republic to evolve and become stronger. The Romans learned not only to fight, but also to manage resources in conditions of total war. This experience laid the foundation for the future great empire that encompassed almost the entire known world. The resilience of one city changed the course of human civilization for many centuries to come. Hannibal's victory forced Roman strategists to completely rethink their methods of warfare. They realized that against such a powerful enemy, it was impossible to act in a straightforward and predictable manner. The state began to develop logistics and diplomacy on a completely new level. Ultimately, it was this bitter experience of defeat that allowed Rome to become the most powerful state in the ancient world. The Battle of Cannae has forever entered the textbooks of military art as the benchmark for encirclement. For 2,000 years, generals have dreamed of repeating the tactical success of the brilliant Hannibal Barca. The German Schlieffen Plan before World War I was inspired by this ancient maneuver. The term "can" has become synonymous with a brilliant victory achieved through intelligence and speed. Hannibal Barca arrived in Italy via the Alps and immediately put Rome in an extremely difficult position. He understood that the enemy's numerical superiority could only be overcome with cunning and the correct deployment of troops. The commander deliberately weakened the center of his army to lure the Roman legions into a trap. This decision required incredible courage from his soldiers, who had to withstand the onslaught of a huge enemy force. The Romans were confident of an easy victory and advanced in tight formation directly on the Carthaginian positions. They pressed forward with their might and did not notice how Hannibal's flanks were gradually beginning to outflank them. The Numidian cavalry and heavy infantry created the perfect conditions for closing the ring. At that moment, the disciplined Roman army turned into an uncontrollable mob. When the Romans realized they were surrounded, it was too late to do anything. The soldiers were standing so close together that many could not even raise their swords to defend themselves. Hannibal destroyed almost the entire enemy army, demonstrating to the world the greatness of his tactical genius. This event revolutionized the concept of how large-scale battles should be fought. However, this battle also serves as an important warning to all future great conquerors. Tactical success does not guarantee victory in war if the enemy's spirit is stronger. Hannibal showed how to destroy an army, but Rome showed how to win the war itself. This story remains relevant today, reminding us of the importance of strategy and national unity. After this terrible defeat, Rome did not give up, even though panic in the city was simply colossal. The Senate refused to even discuss the terms of peace and forbade mourning for the fallen soldiers. Instead of surrendering, the Romans began to assemble new legions, conscripting even very young men into the army. Such perseverance and unity of the people came as a complete and unpleasant surprise to Hannibal. The Carthaginian commander expected Rome's allies to immediately switch sides and open their gates, but most cities remained loyal to the Republic, despite the threat of complete ruin. The Romans changed their tactics and began to wear down the enemy, avoiding large battles. They realized that time was on their side, and that Hannibal's resources were gradually being depleted in a foreign country. In the end, victory in the war went to those who showed greater political longevity and willpower. Hannibal was never able to take Rome, despite all his brilliant tactical maneuvers on the battlefield. History has proven that the fate of states is decided not only by swords, but also by the strength of civil institutions. The personal valor of one leader came up against an iron system that could not be broken with a single blow. The lessons of this battle continue to be studied by experts at military academies around the world. Cannae confirms the immortality of the talent of a commander capable of seeing the battlefield as a whole. The memory of that hot day in Apulia will forever remain a symbol of military triumph and tragedy. The story of Cany is an eternal dialogue between the power of weapons and the power of the human spirit. The Battle of Cannae remains one of the most exciting and instructive episodes in human history. It was a meeting of unsurpassed military talent and incredible state resilience that determined the fate of the Mediterranean for many centuries. We saw how tactical perfection clashed with strategic depth, and how Rome managed to learn from its most terrible disgrace. This story teaches us that even in the most hopeless situation, the will to resist and the ability to learn from mistakes can lead to ultimate triumph. Which part of Hannibal's strategy do you find most impressive? His feigned retreat in the center, or his use of cavalry to completely surround the enemy? Write your opinion in the comments and suggest topics for our next episodes. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be the first to learn the truth about the greatest battles of the past.